Tak prosím vás, proč jsme se tady dneska sešli?
Why are we here today? We are here today because the topic of the ethics conference this year is who co-decides on the topics of documentary films, which means which are not the topics of documentary films, and what are the reasons. And I'm happy to have 4 wonderful guests here today. They represent various institutions, and they also have a lot of experience of Czech and not only Czech cinema footprint. And we can talk about what we see in public space and what we don't see and why. And I ask them to introduce themselves. Radovan, we will start with you. Good afternoon. My name is Radovan Síbrt. I'm a producer, a director. My work, on one hand, is very commercial. I have produced all sorts of cooking formats, you know, from commercial TVs. On the other hand, I was the producer of different films like Bricks Not Bombs, When the War Comes, and Tačmíno, which won Berlinale. So that's a completely different end of the spectrum, or this world. Commercial entertainment and documentary filmmaking. And I also represent the Association of Documentary Filmmakers. Veronika? Good afternoon. My name is Veronika Slámová. For 11 years, I've been working in Czech television in various positions, and in the last year, I moved from the production branch into the creative section, and I'm the creative producer. I've been working in media and audiovisual all my life, and in the last year, towards the end of my life, I should say, I have finally managed to make a move to the part where I always wanted to be. So I'm involved with the creative side, and I'm very happy. Lucie, good evening. I'm Lucie Králová. I'm a director, a dramaturg. For 7 years, I worked in Czech television as a dramaturg. And the output of that was the critical analysis of Czech television, which is also to do with raising topics and who decides. So it's very much about decision-making processes and the things that are not normally seen. And I also teach at FAMU, at the documentary filmmaking department. And Petr, good evening. I'm Petr Badač. I'm a producer. I worked on various fiction and animated films, and most recently, I've been involved in cultural politics, especially in audiovisual. That means various film funds, setting the rules, and now I'm the vice chair of the Council of the Czech Film Fund. Okay, key organizations, Association of Producers, Public Service Television, Film School, and a Film Fund. Those are the most important institutions which in the Czech Republic shape Czech cinema today and in the future. In the case of Czech Fund, the films supported this year might be ready in a year or two, or also in 5 years. The same goes for a film school. Contemporary students may make their first feature films in 5 or 6 years. So it's about an environment which reflects current times, but it also creates the picture of the future. In order to open our debate, I would like to ask you what topics you are missing in Czech documentary film. What do you think filmmakers should make films and they don't? Hard to tell. What I believe is that there are many things that surround us. And on the one hand, I work in an international context. There's a lot of stuff, and it's difficult to find your way. It's not that there's something missing. In the Czech context, what we are missing are bold topics capable of entering an international film dialogue. That's why it's so difficult for our films to travel. They basically don't travel. because we are fairly conservative and in some ways comfortable. I had a discussion with the boss of commercial market at Berlinale, and she said, your films are lazy or comfortable. That's how we are perceived in the West. Can you name a topic which you think is close to us, which hasn't been covered yet? I think we can talk about any topic. We can't say that there's a specific topic which we should focus on. But I think that the method of approaching topics, how shall I put it, is too kind and conflict-free. It's not new, it's not fresh. And that's why nobody in the West or in the world is interested in our films, because we are not able to find our voice. So I can't give you a specific topic which we should be searching for, but I feel that we find it hard to find something in general, and we find it difficult to enter into a dialogue. Okay, I understand. But has it happened to you that you approached someone with a topic and you were not supported, and you believe that this could be the project that could represent what you're talking about? I will be quite specific now. This is not personal, but I always had very negative experience with Czech television. At one point, I actually stopped approaching them with topics. I was no longer interested because it was a waste of time trying to persuade an institution that a film about the war in Iraq is important because it concerns us, because it has an impact on European politics through the waves of refugees who turned up here. The political scene in Europe was radicalized, and it was the film called Blicks, Not Bombs. When I approached Czech television, they said it was a marginal topic for them. I then managed to find funds through Arte and other foreign co-producers. But it's as if in this case, we don't feel the need to be part of the international discourse. We are happy doing just our own little things in our own little context. And it's sometimes very limited just to our space. Lucie and I had a problem with a film about public service. It was supposed to be called Public Made rather than Service, and it was to open a debate about what this public service is supposed to do. And they didn't want that either. So there was a number of things, and I always try and bring them things which have an international potential. And I come across barriers. When they refused Blicks, Not Bombs, they approved a documentary film about the actor Ji.hlava. I can't compete with that. It's Jiřina. And it's understandable that nobody behind the borders, beyond the borders, will not be interested in Ji.hlava, not bombs. Okay, I know it's it's a complicated institution. There are many people who make decisions about a number of things. There's a certain package of money. Then there are some changes in the institution. I hope for the better. We'll come back to that. It's not that I came here to criticize Czech television. Okay, Veronika, we'll come back to the beginning. The same question. In your opinion, what are the topics that are missing? It's true that when it comes to comparisons with the international scene, what we are missing are topics with bigger ambitions, which are capable of covering certain themes in a complex way. Abroad, that works better. I'm not saying that there are simpler reasons. There is a number of reasons. What Radovan mentioned is very relevant. On the other hand, television is a medium which also responds to how the viewers accept things. And unfortunately, and I'm really saying unfortunately, Czech audiences are very often not interested in the international environment. Television is a reflection of the society in which we live, unfortunately. And I'm saying this with humility and with sadness. And since the viewers want different topics, lighter topics, they are interested in lifestyle, in cooking, that sort of stuff. I'm not very familiar with these genres. They enjoy star dance, so it's difficult to break through with other topics. I've been there for a year. From time to time, I'm successful. I might mention the War Investigator, which won the main prize in Warsaw. After 20 years, I think the last film that won a prize was Pelíšky, so I'm happy about that. So it's still a local topic, but it has something to say to the international audience. Then another film, the other a director which covers a topic which she has a personal experience with. If formally it's also done well, again, it travels to festivals that have just been in Leipzig. They were in Busan in South Korea. So those are the highlights where I feel that the topic and the form meet, but I'm not sure how these films will work in Czech television.
Well, mostly documentary filmmakers are educated in humanities, and currently we are finishing a film on propan butane, and it's really difficult for me to produce such a film because I don't understand the topic, I don't understand the chemics. And yes, there are a lot of topics: economics, finance, politics, all the systems, healthcare system, educational system. All these topics require you to make an analysis. And this is something that I lack in TV production. Lucie? For me, it's really difficult not to react to what you've said. Okay, we will get to that later. We've been mentioning here FAMU, and there is a film about the relationship between siblings. If one of the siblings is suffering from autism, and I think that documentary films can definitely offer a broad range of topics involving and mapping institutions, such as, for example, Czech police. In the past, Czech television did a cycle series about the forms of energies in collaboration with ČEZ, the energy company. And yes, here we see that such an organization has an impact on film and film production. Yes, I think that it's really difficult to argue for similar films in television, because all these films require some analysis and a different approach. Commonly, we focus on humanities, but it's difficult to understand all the background. And there are also topics that are relevant for context abroad. I think that it is always impacted or influenced by what the audience wants and what they don't want. Thank you. Petre? That's a lot of topics that we've mentioned, but I'll try to answer your question. By coincidence, today we discussed an experimental film at work with my colleagues, and for us, it's kind of clear. We believe in the Czech Republic there is a lack of creative documentaries when compared, for example, to Slovakia. There are many more of these experimental documentaries. When it comes to experimental film as such, there were a lot of filmmakers introducing or describing their projects as experimental films. But in fact, these were standard films. Yet the filmmakers believe that if they make an artistic author documentary, it's experimental. Veronika mentioned here 2 documentaries, and a lot of the documentaries that we have here are portraits. Of course, this is also caused, for example, by the funding and fundraising, because if we want to produce a documentary, we need 1 or 2 million to be able to produce it, to be able to make a documentary that would also be attractive for foreign viewers. So it is not really easy. If you go to the fund and ask for funding for a film with Ji.hlava, it's pretty easy. But if you ask for funding for a film with a different topic, it is not so easy. And this is also determined by the cultural tradition. And this is one of the obstacles that filmmakers encounter. When you mentioned experimental films, what do you mean by it? Because you mentioned that a lot of filmmakers don't know what that is. Yes, it's what we have just said. Foreign audience is not interested into Czech documentaries because they are not as experimental, as interesting as they could be. And I don't want to say that we need to search for global topics. I've mentioned here some Slovak filmmakers, and I think they are great examples of successful Slovak filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, and their documentaries are successful globally. And there are also a lot of other films made by this director, and these are not the standard films he makes for TV. There is a TV film, Budujeme Slovensko, We Are Building Slovakia, and this is a film that was made under his supervision, and it is an entirely different kind of a documentary, something we would not expect from a common TV documentary. And coming back to the topic, because form is one thing, but then we also have the content, the topic. When you evaluate at the fund of cinema, the films, are there any topics that you miss, or are there any topics that are too common? Well, this is not how we think about the films. It is not the role of our fund to determine the dramaturgy. For us, it's mainly about the form. More than 1/2 of the films is represented by portraits, as I've said. Then we also have a rather journalistic films that are mapping topics interesting for local viewers. But we miss something that would be more interesting for foreign viewer. Currently, the fund is under transformation, and we suppose or we expect a new category will be added, and this category would include films for TV, small projects of a higher quality. It will be called small scale screen, and this category will be able to support more ambitious projects that also have ambitions for big screen as well. And this is also linked to higher budgets available. But of course, this will be much more selective. So thank you for mentioning this and coming back to the topic. I'll answer the question myself. 15 years ago, we made a survey at the festival asking which topics do viewers miss. And then this was a really interesting source of information for TV dramaturge, for example, how to fill in this white spot. I think this is connected to what Lucie and Veronika said, because we don't know what which the people are thinking about.
Not only in the Czech Republic, but also in foreign documentaries, there are a few films that show that without criticizing or without promoting. The analytical ability to show the world, and obviously it's logical why rich people don't want to be part of documentary film. Unfortunately, it's a lot easier to persuade drug addicts to become part of filming than rich people, and that's the problem.
And now I'm getting back to another question, and that is, we are all aware of the fact that the topics of documentary films are random, and commonly they are determined by the motivation of the filmmakers, which is great, and there is also a filter by the institutions that we represent here. That's also commonly done in collaboration with other institutions. But yes, there is the Czech Film Fund, Czech TV, also FAMU can be an instance of such a filter, and these institutions react on the filmmakers' ideas. But I'm wondering, can these institutions do more to support the filmmakers? Because, for example, I've heard that Daniel Prokop goes on a regular basis to Vojo, to a streaming platform, and he discusses the various topics that are screened on this platform. And I'm wondering if other institutions, such as your institutions as well, can have such an impact on the creative industry. Talking from the point of view of APA, of the association, we are trying to negotiate the terms with Czech TV. What is documentary and what is the vision of the institution when it comes to documentaries? And I'm not sure if this is our job, if we should do this.
Já si myslím, že tohle by mělo do jisté míry vycházet z té jediné instituce.
I think that this is something that should be done by the only institution which is here to do that by law, and that is Czech television. I think that Czech television is here to provide for the topics that the Czech society is interested in. Veronika, it's your turn. Of course, we bring some topics to Czech TV, but we always filter them before, because we always think about to which institution we are bringing this new topic, for example. And I'm not only talking about Czech television, I'm also talking about various platforms and festivals, because this is something that determines which film we offer to which institution, because there are some gatekeepers and they are forming our thinking and our ideas. Yes, but I can also remember that Czech television, when there was an anniversary, asked filmmakers to come with proposals, and your task here is to define certain topics and then to call for proposals. So I'm wondering if this is how Czech television and production of Czech television thinks about the various topics. I can speak only based on my experience and from my point of view, which is not the point of view of Czech television. But there are some things that form or maybe deform thinking within Czech television. Peter mentioned one of these issues, and that is that commonly documentary or creative documentary and journalistic film are the same. And this issue is present everywhere, not only at Czech television. Because people don't perceive, they don't see the genre of documentary as an independent genre. And this then has a direct impact on a lack of balance, for example, and other things. It is also more difficult to argue for some topics. Personally, I really try to support current affairs films. That is a prime example, for example, When the War Comes from Radovan. But it really requires me to stand and to defend such a film against people from other departments within Czech television. Of course, the gatekeepers at Czech television should be brave, they should not be bound by any fears, and they should not be interested only in saving their jobs at Czech television. And I have never had such a fear, and I try to search for new topics that are provocative, controversial. And I was never stopped by anybody. So I think it's okay. People are brave. And yes, we have some topics that we need to argue for a lot. Not fight for them, but really to try to argue for these topics, to mention that the bravery is our duty. And as we've heard here, it's also about the conditions, but you, or the institution as Czech television, is an exceptional position. You should also think about how the topics are reflective, how they reflect the society, and if there is an evaluation of the TV production that you screen. Czech television is a channel that is covering a large part of Czech society. So do you have a council that would pick the topics? Yes, we have, for example, Czech Television Committee. Well, that is rather a political body. Yes, we also have other committees. But the question is how to use these tools. And this is what I'm interested in. So you as creative producer, where do you go to if you need to get output regarding the topics of films in Czech television? We have some researches that are done. We have qualitative and quantitative researches, and there is a whole department, research department, that is what we have at Czech television. And are there any external researches done? I don't know. I don't know about them. Maybe we have them, but I'm not aware of them. And yes, I'd be interested in getting feedback or reflection, but I would be careful. I don't want somebody else to determine the agenda, because currently there is a certain freedom. There are various producing groups, various producers, and they can come with various topics. And this is good. And I don't want to cancel this, to abandon this. only because there would be a commission telling us what we should or should not do. This is something I would like to avoid because that could cause self-censorship. And do you think that such a censorship does not exist at this moment? Because Radovan said that filmmakers themselves, they are aware of the institution where they bring their films and they try to evaluate it in advance. Yes, I think that filmmakers always need to think about their target audience. But it really depends on your personal ambitions. If you want to be successful in prime time at Channel 1, you probably need to make a film about Jiřina Bohdalová, but I don't know. I don't have a prime time show. So it depends on your topics, on what you're interested in, what's your target audience. And I have a small group of people that I consult my work with, and this is what I do. And my last question.
Na druhou stranu, pokud třeba Radovan říká, že s filmem Blix Not Bomb neuspěl, tak možná právě nějaký panel expertů, kteří jsou kredibilní,
perhaps a panel of experts who are credible, who appear in discussion programs of Czech television, who wrote books, basically who are credible. Such a panel might define what topics are important or what the direction of production should be. Let's just not say, let's keep things as they are because it's working, because you said yourselves that you're missing a lot of things. So if you can respond to that, and then Lucie has been asking for the floor. I don't know that specific case. I don't know what Radovan did or did not do in Czech television. I can't comment on that, but it's true that there's a big space for improvement when it comes to program and individual channels. I'd expect more information and the ability to develop the program. I admit that. I don't want to sound critical, but that would help us creative producers as well.
Nějaký takovejhle jako profesionální nebo jakoby elitní panel se bude nějakým způsobem.
And if some sort of panel does work in Czech television, comments on Czech television, such opinions should be taken into account. But I'm not a member of the management. I can't say this is a great idea, let's do it. Okay, I promised the floor to Lucie. I'm sorry. I just need to respond before we move forward. Because for 7 years, I did intensive research of what we are talking about. And this was the question I was asking top management of Czech television. And there's this big tension between what the role of the institution is. Should it cultivate the viewer? And that's to do with what is shown at what times. Do I have the courage to say that political and social documentary will be at 8 o'clock? Or will it be at 3 a.m., which is what usually happens? That's an exaggeration, but I'm not far from truth. If I look at the program and current issues, with critical potential, that's what it usually looks like. And as far as I could see in my research, there's this extreme concern, and Veronika mentions that as well. I think as you are working in the institution, you are absorbing this. People don't talk about it. That's one thing. I was asking whether there was some sort of board where creative producers brainstorm, whether they discuss these things, what are the topics that we could raise, and so on. And what immediately comes is the argument that it's not going to be free, it's going to be elitist, there's going to be too much control, and that means that it's not going to be sufficiently free. And talking of FAMU, we talked about the form, but that's also something to do with the language of film and what the film communicates about. These things complement each other. what can be offered, or what can we offer that would be relevant also beyond the borders of this country. The link of what the film is about and how it communicates. If it's organic, if it's natural, and I believe that we are trying to do this. We are trying to be more experimental in terms of form at FAMU. It takes a long time to create films, and we try and mitigate the pressure in the sense that you have to start working with a specific idea of the target group from a certain moment in time. May I? Is it okay? Thank you. I'm interested in FAMU because I go to end-of-term screenings every year. And sometimes I'm very happy, and sometimes I see an opportunity lost because I think that there are so many topics around us and just have to pick up the camera and make the decision to start making a film. And what I see is reluctance, uncertainty, desire to be precise instead of the appetite to experiment and be bold. How do you approach that? How do you fight against that to make sure that even what the students do reflect the Czech environment and the topics of their generation? The generation is very much turned inward. They are very introspective. And something that we really struggle with is that this introspection is a primary need, and they need to communicate that somehow. And in a way, we try not to set the topics that people should be covering in their films, but at the same time, in the feedback, we try and include the social horizon, but that's a huge shift that's been happening in recent years. And during COVID, there were very few films about the situation. There were a few analyses, but it was about the internal feelings, internal experience. And I think it's quite natural. In a way, we are talking about ideal institutions. What is our idea of an institution in the 21st century, at the time when also, thanks to COVID, the world has changed a lot? How should institutions respond? Because very often they are cut in stone and they never changed much, and therefore they are where they are. Talking of FAMU, I remember that several years ago when I was talking to the teachers of the Danish film school, and things changed a lot there, so I believe that their model is now completely different. But at the time, their model was for students in the second or third year to be sent somewhere outside Europe. They had to find production in the given country, let's imagine Egypt or Vietnam. They had to find a production company, make a film, and come back in 3 or 6 months and show the film. And they learned to communicate abroad, to find their way in an environment they don't know, identify a topic which was important for them and for the country. There were many things that they suddenly had to do, and they learned a lot. What would be your idea of an ideal film school, obviously, in the conditions FAMU operates in? And to be precise, you are saying that many students are introspective, they are turned inwards. Should you automatically accept that? I would like you to respond also to the idea of an ideal school. Our students do have this opportunity. They can go out for a month, they can find a topic and make a short film. There are many ideas that they can be open to. There's a very good mentoring program. They encounter top filmmakers, world-class filmmakers. And it's very delicate, and I don't want to criticize, and I don't want to represent institutions. That's not how it works. You always represent an individual voice. We are interested in the voice of institutions. What I find important when it comes to specific things, to search for the reasons why something should speak to us, so that the things communicate communicate. That's how I try and work as a dramaturg. We try and find things which are not closed, but what's also important or significant is when there is a certain risk, not only when it comes to the topic, but also where they are heading to. They get out of the comfort zone of the student and their world. You talked about ČEZ, the Czech electric company. What if you send students there and they make a film? That would be ideal. Or an analysis of the society. That's sometimes quite remote. That's what Veronika mentioned. We all have an opinion. But I know that years ago, when we had Kateřina Smejkalová, a sociologist, in the jury, she said, "You have a wonderful life, you documentarists. You like someone and you start making a film. But when I want to write something on a certain topic, I have to do a lot of research. I can't afford just to write something. I have to do my research, and then I have to analyze that. And that will lead to a conclusion and something that I may not have wanted to write something about to start with." So to what extent the decision to start making a film is dependent only on the filmmaker? That's an important question. And at the school in particular, you can help people move forward. Certainly, yes, and that's happening. There is a debate of this sort. Now we have 2 or 3 projects which are political by their nature. At the same time, creative freedom is important for us because it's demanding to make a film, and what's important is internal motivation. So we do also offer these options. We open certain doors, but I don't think that it should be our role to set the format. In other words, I will send you to this and that company, you will make something, because I think that this and that is important. That's something I find a bit problematic. I think it's more meaningful to perhaps open doors to certain institutions, to offer a certain range of opportunities, and then it's up to the people to invest their energy. I think that's a very important basis. How do I understand myself, and how am I able to interpret the world? And then there may be a certain strength in that, or certain courage in that. So the role of FAMU is to search the personal style of directing, the ability to find a basis in myself, because there are people who are just starting. They have to struggle with many problems. What is the role of the director? What are the pressures? In their 3rd or 4th year, the students may have film at this festival, and that's something that's also shaping them. And that's a big debate. Should student films be at festivals? Because the idea of the gatekeepers, I mean, what might be successful in Ji.hlava, that also shapes the students when they go to incubators, to workshops. It's a very complex issue. It's important to talk about it. I understand that premise. And I think that we do see that what we're missing is societal critique, and the Department of Documentary Filmmaking is one of the channels which should represent that and open it up, but other things play a role too. Before I turn to Petr, Radovan was asking. Yes, we were talking about Czech television and the vision. Tomorrow, the managing director of Czech television, Jan Souček, will be here. And the debate should be about the vision of Czech television vis-a-vis documentary filmmaking. If you're interested, you can come and join us. Okay, that's very good. Okay, everybody says Petr, but you are Petr. Okay, Petr. The role of the fund is huge in all of this. How do you think about these topics? What's more decisive? Because then obviously the points are counted and a decision is made. Or how does it happen? It's important to describe that we are not creative producers. We are a collective body. Now there are 9 people 5 people decide, and it's difficult for 9 people to agree on something. And it's perhaps interesting, let's say, looking at Denmark, it's an interesting model. How do they work? How do their funds work? Talking of documentaries, there are 2 commissioning editors, and they independently decide on films to be supported. You, as filmmakers, can approach Lucie, and Lucie says no. You can go to Veronika, and when she says no, tough. The fund will not give you money. But there's also rotation. People change roles after 2 years. Very often they are experts. They may be filmmakers or commissioning agents from TV and so on. There is a cycle of rotation. That might be optimal. Perhaps I'm very progressive. This personal responsibility is not developed in the Czech Republic. And people like to hide behind collective bodies where they have no responsibility. They can say, you know, I really, really liked it, but I was one of 9 colleagues. And I was overvoted. And that means that the fund is quite specific, because in Czech television there is individual responsibility, because there is a specific producer who does present a project to a board. But it's quite personal. And then it depends on who the 9 people are. Are they scholars? Are they teachers? Are they filmmakers? Based on recent experience, it seems that active filmmakers do not want to become members of the board, because it's a huge amount of work. They want to do their own thing. And then the people who are on the boards are either not active anymore, and I'm not saying that's to the detriment of the matter, but if 8 out of 9 people are not active, that also determines things. Okay. Obviously not in detail, but if you have these hearings, you read the projects, and then I'm sure you discuss the projects which are presented before you vote, I assume. Do you also consider the variety of topics? Do you try and find what you're missing? Or what the environment needs? Or do you consider the economic potential of the films? Let's say the image of the filmmakers, the certainty that they will complete the film and it's not going to be a waste of money. What plays a role? Everything. All of the criteria are taken into account. We have no quotes for how many female or male directors we should support, how many commercial films, how many experimental films, or niche genres. It's a matter of debate. So that it's varied, so that the filmmakers don't feel okay, and that's what Radovan mentioned as well. The fund only supports certain types of projects. If I want to do something else, I can't even be bothered to present it because I know I won't be successful. That's our natural mission. We try and evoke the impression that the filmmakers don't have to feel that way. They should feel that they could bring any project and feel that it's going to be considered and compared. But it's important to say that as well. The fund, if the fund does not support a project, it doesn't mean that it's not good. We have to consider the whole package. The board also rotates. There will be different people every year. They will have different opinions or different priorities. There's a continuous flow. And it never results in an objective analysis for the filmmakers. In the sense, what is bad and what is not. Because sometimes they feel, yeah, last time the result was this and that, yeah, but competition was different and people who were deciding were different. Okay, and next question, and don't tell me that money will resolve this, but what should an ideal fund look like? Obviously, we have an act on audiovisual fund, so it's going to have a new form. There's going to be perhaps a definition of what can and cannot be supported. There might be a dialogue. What, in your view, is an ideal film fund? I have sort of outlined my idea based on the Danish example. Yes, I understand that as a society, we have not progressed enough for a single person to handle money, for corruption reasons as well. But let's say it's going to be like that in Slovakia very soon. Slovakia was always ahead. Yes, exactly. I think the step that we are taking now, which is reducing the number of people from 9 to 5, ideally it should be 3, I think it's a step in the right direction. A step in the right direction would be to have people who are as active as possible. And I don't want to name a specific profession. I think it's very important to invite theorists or festival people, but because there are different points of view, there will always be a discussion. And in practice, the filmmakers are always very much focused on themselves, and they don't want to participate in the administration of public matters. And in the end, there's one voice which represents himself or herself, but may not necessarily create conditions for all possibilities. Radovan, you wanted to respond? I had a number of responses to different things. Okay, one by one. The fund is the only institution where I don't hear this is not what our viewers want. And it's exceptional in the film world. Wherever you come, you will always hear, this is not what our viewers want. And the managers know what the viewer wants. Because they know what they wanted last time, but in reality they don't know what they will want next. And I understand that in commercial TVs, because they live on advertisements, subscriptions, and they have to generate profit. That's why the companies exist. We may disagree, but that's how it is. And I have a little bit of a problem when it comes to an institution which is supposed to be public service. Therefore, if I hear, this is not what our viewers want, I have a problem, because I think that the institution should be more courageous. But then it's also about the fact that the representatives of the others, like Netflix, during the summer break, I saw people who decided about their program. They also have a very good idea or precise idea of what people want, because they know what worked in the past, this and that series and so on. And then they tell you, actually, we don't know what's going to work. We hope that someone will surprise us. So they don't know either, although they have lots and lots of data. Streamers get a lot of data about you as subscribers. It's terrifying. And the management doesn't really look at what's on TV. They just look at the data that come out. And on the basis of that, they decide on the future. But they only process what worked in the past. People sometimes don't understand why certain things work. The most successful series in the world, everyone keeps waiting for another season. Nobody knows why it worked. But what they are looking for is completely different to this series. So they are basing their decisions on what worked in the past. And they are interested in their annual bonuses, because obviously they have a bonus if there are enough viewers. And that's our problem. I don't understand why in public service television the director's salary is conditional upon a bonus which is based on ratings, among other things. Ratings shouldn't play any role. It should be about creating a discussion. It shouldn't be about feeding the society what they want, because that's what we do in commercial televisions. We feed you rubbish because you want to watch that. Okay. But a public service institution should give you the option to move forward and to educate you. And I think that's the main difference. And unfortunately, in the last years, the management came from commercial television. They created a functional machine, but at the same time, they created competition to commercial televisions. I can't see any reason why Czech television should compete with commercial televisions on ratings, why they should churn out so many series. And then when there's a demand for a societal documentary film, 40, 30-minute documentary films have the same budget as one series, one episode of a series. Yes. Only people who are desperate or very enthusiastic can make documentary films. Okay, if you have any questions, please let us know.
Takže hlašte se.
Raise your hands.
A pokud si chcete otázku ještě 10 vteřin promyslet, tak chtěla reagovat Lucie.
And if you want 10 more seconds to think about your question, everybody wants to respond.
K tomu, jak vznikne něco nového nebo zajímavého, jo?
How are new or interesting things created? There's some interesting research which shows that the system, TV, festivals, various gatekeepers want something original. But it also turns out that it's not really something original, it's something new. In other words, a shift of something that we know, which becomes slightly different and which responds to something that is deeply subconscious. And this mechanism is fascinating. You mentioned the Danish model. What I find really inspiring is the Norwegian model. 10% of management, I'm sure that's still how it works. They work on the basis of right ideas. In other words, we have something, we know that we can achieve that, 80% of that, we have that under control, but there's 10% that's intangible. There's this strange space for things we don't know about. We don't know whether they will happen and they will bring something. And I will come back to FAMU. It seems to me that this space can be significant also because it will join the social space. And I think that this is what the school should do. They should look for this strange continuity and not diminish the space too much. Veronika? I'm a lifelong optimist. I always see a glass which is half full rather than half empty. And that's the dynamics which makes it possible for me to continue existing in Czech television. Yes, we have a new management. We have a new content director, Tereza Polachová. And the institution is always about people. That's what I learned. It's always about people. You can set rules, whatever, panels. But the institution consists of specific people. And what's significant is for the people to have some sort of accountability, competencies and accountability. I believe and I hope that the approach to documentaries is also changing. The first sign I see is that Ivana Milošević-Power became the boss of creative dramaturgs, and she's well respected in the international environment. She works on various platforms. And I very much welcome that because she's someone I can consult topics with and I can get feedback which I believe, and that's valuable for me. So that's something that is changing in the institution. I hope changing for the better. Obviously, television is now fighting for an increase in the license fees, the same as radio. So it's open to ideas. If the director is here tomorrow, he can definitely approach it. So that's the optimistic side of television. Another optimistic thing from the European Broadcasting Commission of fiction works, in case there are any producers or filmmakers, be it as it may, there are interesting figures. More or less all VOD platforms and television stations produce most documentary content. These are not reality shows. Those are separate. And I was surprised by that. In terms of documentary, the share is much higher than the share of fiction works. So again, you need to see how full the glass is. You need to see how they support it and why. It's logical, it's cheaper. Everybody is struggling for money. Everybody is fighting for viewers. So that's good news. And the third piece of good news, to follow on what Radovan said, although they may have sophisticated metrics and AI and so on, there's always space and an opportunity to come up up with something that falls beyond these measurements. And that's something that will become successful. So if filmmakers may be depressed and believe that it doesn't really make sense to start developing something, no, it's not like that if you come up with an original idea. Obviously, you need the form as well. And well-developed approach, you always have a chance. Everybody needs content. Everybody needs good content. And that applies to everyone. Yes, I wanted to follow up on what Radovan said. I think that the fund is in a similar situation as the director of Czech television. It's important to realize that for the institution to remain relevant, that's why they follow ratings. If the ratings were bad, they wouldn't be relevant. And the politicians would be thinking, what good is this institution? And the fund is facing a similar thing. We had some research, survey. There are different opinions on what we should and should not support. The results were varied. We are evaluating them. But it's still a state institution. You might have noticed that the parliament adopted the act that will be changing the fund. It needs the politicians because they are the stakeholders of this institution. And that's why they need to keep them happy. And politicians are not happy if our experimental films are premiered in Ji.hlava. They will be happy if, and I don't want to offend anyone, if they come to a premiere of an episode of Trabant traveling around the world. Because the politicians suddenly see that the fund is doing something relevant, there are viewers, and therefore we are in a similar situation as Czech television. The fund also needs to fight for its existence, to defend itself in front of stakeholders. Okay, yeah, I'm not against selfies, but still. Yeah, it's not important to say that, because it does determine the support. Perhaps the fund itself, if there was no one above it, and they just gave it money, the strategy might be different. And these pressures are not visible, but I'm sure there are pressures. Because they need to satisfy the stakeholders. Sure. Okay. If you have any questions, raise your hands, please. If not, I have one. Okay, yeah, there is a question. Microphone, please. Can we turn the light on? It's strange because we are in the dark. But I have just mentioned this fear, this concern that the medium or the fund needs to remain relevant. But you also mentioned that if you come up with content which is more risky, it might be relevant and it might be successful. Lucie, you talked about the Norwegian way, the 10%. Is that something Czech television is also thinking about? In practical terms? Some sort of system. Sometimes you can be more risky in a systematic way for works to be made, and so on.
Já dám určitě slovo Veronice v tom, ale já jsem se...
I will let Veronika answer, but that was also one of my questions in my book. To what extent do they want that? Marek keeps coming back to the active involvement or active shaping of the space. Yes, these are very relevant questions. Again, I detected this dichotomy. We will not be cultivating or influencing because it would mean that we don't have any freedom. That's the problem with regulation every time. It's a question of ideology. It's been a few years since I did this research, but I think that this is very important in this institution. I think it's important to create this space. Veronika? I don't have an answer. I don't know the model. I don't know the Danish model in detail. I can't respond.
tam prostor opravdu vždycky k
and I'm certain there is always space for improvement. It seems to me that e-vysílání is also a space where more courageous things appear. Yes, that's right. It always takes time.
Oni jsou strašně jako pomalí, jo? Oni strašně jako pomalu
Institutions are slow to respond.
To jako je proces, který
it's a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it's also about a change of viewers because the younger generation has different needs and different interests. And they are very well educated, and it's not really easy to satisfy them with what we have been producing so far. Obviously, that's a slight exaggeration, but these things influence each other. I would be happy if there was space for some sort of wild card, and we did have internal debates about it, in the sense that this might be the future. I'm not sure how it ended, because the management of the channels also changed. In the past, we did talk about this version of a wild card. Okay, this is going to be my final question. Just a second, just a detail. From the point of view of the fund, unlike institutions, we do support this. And when I was talking about stakeholders, it's important to say that it's the obligation of the fund and the board. And it's also important to educate the stakeholders. You know, Trabant is maybe not what you want. Perhaps When the War Comes is something that you should watch, and this is something that should represent the Czech Republic. So it's not the burden on the shoulders of the filmmakers, but it's the work of the fund to defend its existence. I think Trabant is also fine.
Ale já bych rád vlastně tu diskuzi, protože jsme na konci.
But because we are coming towards the end of our discussion, I would like to ask one final question. My question might have implied that I'm asking whether we should educate someone. But this is not only the case of the Czech Republic, but the Western world in general. We seem to have a divided society, fragmented society. Zora Čápová pointed to that in the film that we showed 2 days ago. She showed two media worlds. One is the respect journal, serious journalism, and the other were representatives of disinformation scene, Mr. Vidlák and his colleagues. And I feel that a part of intellectuals
Konec konců není to tak dávno, kdy levicoví
turning up their noses at the other side.
České televize, protože přece byli levicoví.
It's like when leftist intellectuals were not allowed in talk shows of Czech television because they were leftist. And we should reflect this. We should be addressing both groups. We should be interconnecting the world again. I admit that we do not talk about this in the institution, but I see the division also in
to rozdělení vidím v tom, kam se posouvá ten komerční svět.
Where the commercial world is going and where the festival world is going. And I'm talking about film. The commercial world is heading towards soulless entertainment. Just to give you an idea, the most popular TV program in the USA last year was Love Island. It had over 1 billion views. And then 500 million The Fall, and then other series. Yeah, we all need to relax. But you, as a filmmaker, as a producer, as a representative of the Producers Association, you have, or do you have, some sort of social responsibility? Do you think about it at all? Your position in the association has a certain social dimension. And the perception of the divided society, is that a topic topic for you and your association. I will just finish what I was saying. Then there's the festival world. Very often, for normal viewers, the films are really hard to watch. They don't understand what's happening in front of them.
Film Ji.hlava sice měl premiéru, nevím, před 8 lety.
But the film Let Live War, which was premiered 8 years ago, still works today, and it can still speak to us, but nobody sees that. That's a question, because obviously it may not have a billion views, although that's something I might wish, but it's collecting viewers. And in the 60s, people did not go to see the new wave films, including Forman's films, but we still watch them. But this billion, okay, that's a perspective of the current time, but the films which festivals, not only Ji.hlava, search for are films which will endure in time. But my question is, we are living in a society, in 5 days there will be elections in the US, in a year's time in the Czech Republic. And it's not about engagement, but do you as institutions think about the role of yourselves in a social dialogue in a divided society? I can only talk as a producer, and I always make sure that works made by filmmakers communicate with as many viewers as possible, because I think that closing ourselves in an intellectual bubble is a road to hell. That's what divides the society. And in the commercial things that we produce,
jako v rámci toho daného formátu, v rámci toho, že pořád musím
within the framework of the given format, I have to communicate with a large number of viewers. I try and cultivate the discussion, and I think that's the only way.
Vlastně to rozdělení jako jediná snaha, jako moje snaha jako producenta je tyhle jako světy lehce jako přibližovat.
As a producer, I try and converge these two worlds. Okay, you can use
to jsem odmít produkovat.
Island to somehow join the society. I refuse to be the producer for that. Okay, Veronika? I'd say that for me, it's a fundamental topic.
Nějakou jakoby stmelování té společnosti nebo aspoň jako zakopávání toho hlubokého příkopu, to je opravdu téma, který je moje osobní.
Bridge over the differences or to cement the society. I think that the institutions should be doing that and should be creating that space consciously.
Není to vůbec jednoduchý.
It's not easy at all.
Ta propast je fakt velká. Jo? A vlastně, když uděláte
because the gap is huge. And if you do something which speaks more to one part, people on the other side will start shouting. So you're still on edge. I'm trying to develop a discussion format which is called Across the Abyss. We want to have people with different opinions sitting at the table, but we also want to engage people who are not too well known in the media, and that's also difficult because that might mean that people can't discuss, then there might be someone who's much stronger than others and will draw all of the attention. So we are looking for a format of this talk show, and we want to offer that to Czech television. So yes, I do find it fundamental. And generally speaking, when it comes to public service media, it never paid off to censor opinions. On the contrary, when you look at populism in the Czech Republic, it doesn't work. I actually feel that if politicians are invited to take part in a debate, politicians from these various parties, they very often shoot themselves in the leg, because very often then their political careers were over. That's my opinion. It's not the opinion of television. This doesn't pay off. And it's better to hold a wider discussion. And the viewers, the audience, will see their own representative, and they will not feel to be ignored, because they feel that they are ignored or neglected. They may be radicalized. I just want to remind that the film that Marek mentioned was made at FAMU, and it's a very political film.
Já přemýšlím, co jde teda dělat.
But I'm trying to think about what can be done.
A co mi přijde třeba cesta, že odkud se jako rekrutujou ty gatekeepři.
Where are these gatekeepers recruited from? And they can be recruited from the school too. And I think that's a very interesting way. Many of us who studied at FAMU later worked at these institutions. And we tried to make them more open. And try to introduce more radical, courageous things. And that's something that we encourage the students to do. We are telling them that they don't necessarily need to be filmmakers, because it's how to make a living being a filmmaker. So you multiply your roles. Very often you are a producer, a cinematographer, a director, and very often you turn up in an institution, check television, check radio, or you become an expert in the fund, for example. Speaking for the fund, we work with whatever comes to us, so we try and support people. But there's another element, which is the freedom of decision-making. Look at Hungary or perhaps Slovakia. Sometimes the regimes suddenly change, and it's impossible to support certain projects for ideological reasons. And the debate that Veronika was talking about will be distorted, and there will be only a certain angle, because that's supposed to be the correct angle. And people will try and be loyal to their bosses. So it's a question of a whole mechanism. We should appreciate the fact that we are still living in a country where these mechanisms are working, although they may not be ideal. Because very often things suddenly change in certain countries, and it's very easy to destroy things that took years to develop. Any more questions? A final question, perhaps? Over there, Ivo. Ivo Bystřičan. Thank you very much for an excellent debate. Very inspiring. To conclude with, I have a more simple question. To what extent, in your opinion, the institutions which you represent here manage to explain, and I don't mean commercial television, but the others, how do you manage to promote the public service? To what extent your institutions understand what public service is? And are they capable of explaining this to the public? Because talking about the divided society, it's not magic. People live different lives, they have various problems, they may have obvious problems. There are quite a few people who have problems. There are different problems among seniors, different problems among ethnic groups. To what extent do you believe you manage to explain what's behind the issues, what's behind the problems, and uncover the mechanisms? And make sure that the public understands. And by watching your content, they understand how we are living and why. It's a very simple question, yes. It's always difficult to start. Does Radovan want to start? I represent an institution which should explain its existence. It's not even public service. We are an organization of lobbyists which defends the interests of producers in audiovisual, so it's probably not a question for me. Okay, Radovan will start. But obviously you can add something. Veronika, I can imagine that we could communicate in a better way. We do try to communicate about the public service and all sorts of means available that our PR department has. Obviously, it's also true that the big disadvantage of these institutions is that they are very, very old, and the mechanisms and everything has been settled for such a long time, and dust has settled on that as well, and things which are meant well are really hard to promote. And again, it's about individual people. Different people may have different approaches. But globally speaking, I think that the debates must have been really hard. I don't take part in them. It's the job of the management, but the debates with the politicians. And even if you listen to the discussion about the amendment to the law in the parliament, the arguments that you hear, that's a tragedy. That's really tragic. Yeah, it would be a great film. Yeah, let's make a film about it. It's tragic. So these are elected representatives of the public. And I think that television is managing to explain and defend its role, but it's very hard. I think that the people in those positions do what they can, and I don't envy them. I think that I wouldn't be able to do that. I don't have so much patience. I think I would be insulting people. These are false arguments. I just need to mention that even Western countries have been through these debates. And even there, television stations, their lives are not easy. Even in Switzerland, it seemed that public service television would be cancelled, and there was a referendum. According to predictions, it was supposed to be a failure, but then it was the opposite. And Switzerland really activized the part of the society which found it important. I think the question is whether filmmakers or people who watch films, independent public service films, should not be more active and explain that it's significant and why, and we shouldn't wait for referendums. I think they do that. ARAS and APA, these associations, when television does need support, they do. That's my opinion anyway. Some of us have seen Ivo's presentation, and the result of that for me was something that I noticed in Czech television. It's difficult to ask the question, or need to ask the question, do we all understand the role of the public service in the same way? At the documentary department in FAMU, we decided that we need to give it some space. We discuss it in the department, and the understanding may be varied, and you need to start there. And talking of FAMU, I have seen a very interesting phenomenon. There's artistic research and PhD studies, and that includes a reflection of the process, including way of communicating outwards about not being ideological. And we are creating this sort of space, which I think could be one of the ways. Peter, I will update the question for you a bit. There's going to be a new audiovisual fund. Will it try and make sure that the projects that will support are going to be part of public service? I think that one of the advantages of the fund is we are not so visible. Czech television, also given its budget and media coverage, it's a much stronger organization. We have 150 million, so we are not so interesting. But that gives us the freedom when we decide. So yes, the setup and something that has been mentioned, yeah, it's about people. It depends on who's going to be deciding about projects, and it's possible that these people will view things differently. And because it's a collective body, it's a sort of Game of Thrones, a succession. It's a power struggle. Who's going to be successful with what? And which group of filmmakers or producers or animated film producers will manage to break through, because that's going to be a big collective body, 18 members, representatives of various fields of the audiovisual industry, and that's going to be the main body that will be deciding what money will be given to what format or genre. Radovan, based on your experience, I promised that you would finish. Based on your experience, because you are part of those who were preparing the act and you were taking part of the discussion. and that was good. The intention is to maintain the public service dimension. Yes, and I think they managed to do that. Especially since it was approved by the parliament. That doesn't have to be the proof of the public service dimension being maintained. I think if it weren't, there would be many more amendments, or worse amendments. But the bill that the ministry submitted was adopted without any huge changes, and it was consulted with experts, and it was prepared by the fund. I wouldn't be as optimistic. The fund will have a lot more money, and you were able to see what was happening during the preparation phase. The form or the version was different, and then it was being amended due to the pressure of various interest groups, such as the company that owns Nova, and also influences the government. So there were very specific attempts to make sure that commercial televisions have a lot more influence over the flow of the money from the fund. And the attempts in the parliament were also by these commercial companies to make sure that the money from this budget to go directly to these big players and to weaken the smaller players. So, yeah, but that didn't go through, actually. No, it didn't, but it doesn't mean that the attempts will not continue. Obviously, I'm also very curious to see what the fund is going to be. Czech Television is not a member of the board because we do not contribute to the fund. Therefore, the public service dimension will be determined by the board, and the board will include commercial as well as association representatives. But I'm curious to see what their view is going to be, whether it's going to be altruistic, and what it will bring us. It's good that things are changing and transforming, but I would be a careful optimist. I would be carefully optimistic. Sorry, I sometimes interrupted you. There were 4 of you. There were lots of topics. I was wondering whether we would have enough to say in 90 minutes, but we could continue for another 3 years. But nobody would stay here, I think. Ivo would.
Takže já vám děkuju, že jste přišli.
Thanks for coming.
Radovan, Síbrt, Veronika, Slámová, Lucie, Králová, Badač. Díky.